I still remember standing in my garage on a cold Saturday morning, staring at a half-finished storage bench leaning against the wall. The smell of fresh pine was still in the air. Sawdust covered the floor. And right in the middle of assembly, I realized the measurements in the plan didn't match the cut list I'd already followed. One side panel set almost a quarter-inch higher than the other. So there I was, holding two pieces of lumber I'd already ruined, wondering if I just wasn't good at this. That feeling? Thinking the problem is your skill, when the real problem started long before you picked up the saw. And eventually I started asking a question that completely changed how I approach woodworking. What if the reason so many projects fail has less to do with building and more to do with the plans themselves? For years, I treated woodworking plans like disposable tools. Need a coffee table? Buy one plan. Need shelves? Buy another. Outdoor bench? Another purchase. Every new project meant another search, another PDF, another gamble. At first, it seemed logical. Why pay for more than you need? But after enough wasted weekends, enough abandoned builds sitting in the corner of my garage, I realized something most hobby woodworkers eventually discover the hard way. The woodworking world has a serious quality problem. A lot of plans look professional. Nice renders. Clean diagrams. Fancy thumbnails. But once you actually start building, you find missing steps, vague measurements, skipped assembly instructions, or materials lists that somehow leave out half the hardware. And the worst part is, most people blame themselves, not the plan. I've talked to hobby builders who spend hundreds on tools thinking better equipment would fix their accuracy problems, when the real issue was they were working from incomplete instructions from the beginning. That distinction matters. Because once you realize the problem isn't always your ability, you stop wasting time trying to push through broken plans. One of the biggest frustrations for me was the constant restart cycle. You spend 3 nights researching plans online. You finally settle on one. Maybe you even pay for it. Then you clear out your Saturday, buy your lumber, organize your clamps, and start cutting. Everything feels fine until step 5 or 6. Suddenly the assembly order doesn't make sense. A dimension in the diagram doesn't match the cut list. The project photo shows a joint the instructions never explained. Now you're improvising. And this is where most people make a mistake that costs them months. They assume woodworking is supposed to feel confusing. So instead of questioning the plan, they question themselves. I did this constantly. I'd stand there thinking maybe I measure wrong. Maybe I cut too fast. Maybe I just wasn't experienced enough yet. Meanwhile, the real issue was sitting right there on the page. The second problem was something I didn't even notice at first. The hidden cost of buying plans individually. On paper, paying $10 or $20 for one project sounds reasonable. Until you realize woodworking isn't a one-project hobby. You build one thing successfully and immediately start thinking about the next thing. Then another. Then another. A workbench turns into shelving. Shelving turns into cabinets. Cabinets turn into outdoor furniture. Before long, you spent more money collecting random disconnected plans than you spent on your actual tools. And here's the part nobody tells beginners. Most individual plans aren't designed as part of a system. They're isolated documents created by different people with different assumptions, different drafting styles, different terminology, and different levels of detail. So every new project feels like relearning the process from scratch. Different notation, different instructions, different measurement logic. What surprised me most was how mentally exhausting that becomes over time. You stop looking forward to building because half your energy goes into decoding the plan itself. Then there's the issue almost nobody talks about openly. Custom spaces. Most garages aren't magazine workshops. Mine certainly isn't. Half my garage is storage. The other half is a folding workbench, a table saw, and whatever free floor space I can reclaim that weekend. And yet most woodworking plans assume perfect conditions. Full shops. Unlimited room, expensive tools. I can't tell you how many times I found a project I liked, only to realize halfway through that it physically wouldn't fit the wall I planned it for, or the dimensions required tools I didn't own, or the materials list quietly assumed lumber sizes that aren't even commonly available at local stores anymore. So what happens? You modify the plan yourself, And sometimes that works. But more often, one small adjustment creates 3 new problems downstream. The drawer spacing changes. The support brace no longer lines up. The hardware placement shifts just enough to ruin the fit. Then comes that familiar thought again. I must be doing something wrong. And here's what all these situations have in common. The issue usually isn't motivation. It isn't effort. And most of the time, it isn't even woodworking skill. It's fragmented, incomplete planning. That's the hidden problem underneath. A surprising number of failed builds. Bad plans create hesitation. Hesitation creates mistakes. Mistakes create frustration. And eventually people stop building altogether. Not because they can't do it, because the instructions failed them long before the first cut. Once I understood that, I stopped asking, where can I find another plan? I started asking a completely different question. Where can I find a system that's actually built for real-world woodworking? That shift led me to something I honestly wish I'd found years earlier. Instead of buying isolated plans one at a time, I found a full woodworking library organized around a completely different philosophy. Every plan should already be tested before it reaches the builder, not theoretical drawings, not rough sketches uploaded for clicks. Actual build-tested plans written from the perspective of someone who already constructed the project step by step. And the difference became obvious almost immediately. The first thing I noticed wasn't flashy graphics or a fancy presentation. It was clarity, exact cut lists, complete materials breakdowns, assembly order that actually made sense, multi-angle diagrams that showed how parts connected before you started fastening anything together. No guessing. No interpreting vague instructions. Just a clean progression from first board to finished project. And the checklist relief was immediate. The wasted lumber problem? Solved by accurate material lists and verified dimensions. The weekend disappears while searching for plans problem? Solved by having thousands of organized projects searchable by category, size, and difficulty. The my garage is too small problem? Solved because many of the builds were specifically designed around basic tools and compact workspaces. That part surprised me most. A lot of these projects weren't designed for dream workshops. They were designed for normal people working in garages, basements, and backyard sheds. One thing that really changed how I viewed the entire system was the custom request feature. I tested it myself. I needed a narrow corner cabinet for an awkward wall near my workbench. Standard dimensions wouldn't work. Most plans online weren't even close. Normally, that's where a project dies. You either spend hours redesigning everything yourself or abandon the idea completely. Instead, I submitted the dimensions and waited. A couple weeks later, I received a fully drafted plan built around the exact measurements I'd requested, not just a rough sketch. An actual build-ready plan with materials, diagrams, and step-by-step instructions tailored to the space. And suddenly woodworking stopped feeling like constant problem solving. It started feeling like building again. Now, if you're skeptical at this point, I understand completely, because I had the same hesitation, especially if you've been burned by giant plan bundles before. Most are chaotic file dumps filled with incomplete projects and recycled drawings. But what changed my mind was seeing how practical the system actually was for ordinary builders. One guy I read about had half of a one-car garage and built a wall-mounted tool cabinet plus a folding stool using basic tools. Another builder had only owned a table saw for 6 months and still completed a beginner bookshelf project his family actually used. Not perfect showroom furniture. Real projects. Real spaces. Real constraints. And honestly, that's the key difference. The system works because it respects the reality of how most people actually build. Limited time, limited space, limited tools, but structured plans. That's what changes everything. When instructions are tested in advance, woodworking stops feeling unpredictable. Because here's the quiet truth most people don't want to admit. If nothing changes, 6 months from now the cycle probably continues. More bookmarked plans, more unfinished project against the wall, more evenings spent searching instead of building. More money wasted on lumber mistakes that shouldn't have happened in the first place. And over time, something worse happens. You stop trusting yourself. Not because you lack ability, but because repeated frustration slowly convinces you you're worse than you really are. Now compare that to a different version, of the next 6 months. You walk into your garage with a clear project in mind. You search for it in seconds. You print the plan, buy exactly the materials you need, and spend your weekend building instead of troubleshooting instructions. Not fantasy, just structure. That's the difference. You've already been doing the hard part. The plans just haven't been keeping up with you. Looking back now, I don't see my failed projects as proof I was bad at woodworking. I see them as evidence that I kept trying despite working from incomplete systems. And once I finally found a library built around tested, organized, real-world plans, the entire process became simpler, not easier, simpler. The next step stopped feeling overwhelming because I wasn't starting from zero every single time. If you want to see what I use for every build, I left a link in the description. And if you've ever had a project go sideways because the instructions fell apart halfway through, leave a comment. I read every one. If this kind of content helps you build smarter, subscribe for more videos like this.